Dougga. Dougga or Dougga is undoubtedly the most prestigious of Tunisia's archaeological sites. Several factors contribute to its standing on the Tunisian archaeological scene. Its location on a spur dominating the rich Meroe Valley, the size of the site extending over several dozen hectares and covering several historical eras, the vegetation, in particular the many centuries old olive grove surrounding it, and of course the excellent state of conservation of most of its monuments, some of which, such as the Capitol or the theater, were restored to their upright position during a campaign undertaken just after the First World War by prisoners of war. These extremely well-preserved ruins were inhabited by a series of cultures, notably the Numidians, the Punics, the ancient Greeks, and the Romans. Dougga boasts a series of impressive ruins amidst its 70 hectares, including a 3,500-seater theater, temples such as those of Juno Caelestis, public baths, a forum, a trifolium villa, 2 triumphal arches, and the remains of a market. It has a variety of cultural influences, having been a thriving Numidian capital first established in the 5th century BC, and later being incorporated into the Roman Empire in 46 BC as part of Julius Caesar's annexation of eastern Numidia. Therefore, whilst most of its existing remains date back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, there are several sites that predate this period. In fact, even the layout of Dougga can be traced as having remained the same as it had been under the Numidian civilization. However, one of the oldest ruins at Dougga are those of a 6-tiered Punic Libyan mausoleum thought to date to the 2nd or even 3rd century BC. The incredible state of preservation of Dougga, combined with its mix of cultural influences, led UNESCO to list it as a World Heritage Site in 1997. Grand and full of fascinating sights, Dougga is one of Tunisia's most spectacular places. Lalibela. While many spectacular churches have been constructed in Ethiopia, perhaps the country's most famous churches are the ones carved out of stone. Located 150 miles south of Axum, Lalibela is the best example of Ethiopia's hypogeum rock-hewn architectural tradition. With 11 rock-hewn churches, Lalibela is understandably a place of pilgrimage for those in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The site Lalibela was originally called Roha, but it eventually took the name of the king Lalibela, who ruled around 1200 CE as part of the Zagwe dynasty. King Lalibela is traditionally attributed as the builder of the churches at this site. Lalibela's 11 churches are carved out of a hillside which is made of soft reddish volcanic rock. The churches can be divvied into 2 complexes, a northern and southeastern complex, that are connected through a series of carved passageways and naturally occurring wadis. 6 churches are featured in the northern complex and 4 in the southeastern complex. Located west of the other complexes, the final and most famous rock-hewn church of Lalibela is Beta Georgis, Church of St. George, which is featured in the article Where is the Land of Sheba, Arabia or Africa? By Bar Kribis in the September-October 2016 issue of Biblical Archaeology Review. Shaped like a cross, Beta Georgis sits on a step platform inside a 72 by 72 foot courtyard that's 36 feet deep. Originally, it was accessible only from the west by means of a long approach, measuring nearly 100 feet, that led uphill and connected the church to the wadi below. Standing at the same level as the church, it's not immediately apparent that Beta Georgis is shaped like a cross, but from above it becomes clear that not only is it shaped like a cross, but that Greek crosses have been carved into its roof as well. Beta Georgis has 3 doors and 12 windows. Each of the windows is adorned by a cross and floral motif carved in relief above its opening. An additional 9 false windows are carved into the exterior of the church at the same level as the doors, but they do not open into the church's interior. Of all the churches at Lalibela, Beta Georgis is the best preserved. Dated to the 12th or 13th century, it's also one of the latest churches at the site. The other churches are estimated to have been built over a span of several centuries, from the 10th through the 13th centuries or later. Axum. The oldest continuously inhabited city in sub-Saharan Africa, Axum was founded more than 3,000 years ago in the days of the Queen of Sheba. It served as capital of the Aksumite Kingdom, which was the dominant trade entity in the Horn of Africa for over a millennium prior to the rise of Islam, stretching from the Sudanese Nile across the Red Sea to Yemen. A UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1980, Aksum today is replete with towering obelisks, ruined palaces, engraved tablets, and other ancient artifacts dating back to its glory days. Aksum's kingdom was in present-day Eritrea and northern Ethiopia between about 200 BC and AD 650. Its capital city of Aksum sat on the western edge of the Eritrean highlands and was for several centuries a powerful and wealthy city. Historians take an interest in Aksum because its ruler, Azana, converted to Christianity in 340, shortly after the Roman Emperor Constantine became a Christian. The form of Christianity practiced in Aksum, called monophysite, was based on the belief that Jesus Christ was completely divine and not human. The main source of the kingdom's wealth was international trade. Archaeological evidence and written records indicate that by 100 BC, a series of towns connected the inland capital to the port of Adulis on the Red Sea coast. These towns formed an overland trade route to trading partners along the shores of the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. In the late AD 200s, Aksum began to mint coins of gold, silver, and copper that made it easier to trade with other lands. Most of these coins have been found in southern Arabia, one of the territories that Aksum controlled. Aksum reached the height of its power and influence in the 500s under King Caleb. Thereafter, the kingdom suffered a rapid decline, and within 100 years of Caleb's death had lost its trading partners and the territories it had ruled. At the same time, soil erosion and the people's overuse of its natural resources weakened Aksum's local economy. All that's left of ancient Aksum are the ruins of the capital, with its giant carved stone columns. These columns were probably grave monuments for the tombs of Aksum's pre-Christian kings. Sudan pyramids. Deep in the Saharan desert, huge stone pyramids rise, monuments to ancient kings. But they aren't in Egypt. These pyramids are far to the south in Sudan. Far less well known by either archaeologists or the public than their Egyptian counterparts, these pyramids rise in close-knit clusters at once grand sites like El Kuru, Gebel Barkal, and Meroe. The pyramids in Sudan were built over a period of hundreds of years by a civilization known as the Nubians. The Nubians were initially conquered by the Egyptians and for centuries lived under Egyptian administration. After the Egyptian dynasties fell into disarray, Nubia broke free and became its own empire, even conquering the Egyptians for a time. Throughout their history, the two societies maintained extensive trade and cultural ties, leading to the Sudan pyramids. The first Nubian pyramid was built around 700 BC, much later than the Great Pyramids. After so many years of exchange, the Nubians worshipped Egyptian gods and kept many Egyptian traditions, even as Egypt itself faded as a power. The Nubian pyramids are smaller, typically less than 100 feet high, where the pyramids of Khufu is a whopping 440 feet tall. The Nubian pyramids have a steeper slope, a byproduct of Nubian Shadoof-based construction. The Shadoof, a simple counterweight crane, was set in the middle and the pyramid went up around it. The crane could only reach so far, so the base of the pyramid had to be small, mandating steep sides. The differences do not end there. An 1897 British expedition to Gebel Barkal excavated inside a pyramid and soon discovered that there was no burial chamber, as would be expected in Egypt. The burial chamber was underneath the pyramid, so the Nubian pyramids, rather than being tombs, were enormous headstones. They're very close together, carefully aligned with certain stars. The pyramids had solid sides with a fill center, a very practical form of pyramid construction also used in Mesoamerica. The pragmatism of the Nubian builders might be the monument's undoing. These smaller facing blocks that the Nubians used made a convenient source of building materials, and many blocks have been scavenged. Furthermore, the 1897 expedition noted that many of the pyramids have been truncated. This was the work of 1834 treasure hunter Giuseppe Ferlini, who found gold underneath a pyramid in Meroe. Hoping to go back for more, he decided to confuse his rivals by removing the tops of the pyramids. Future would-be looters did the same, resulting in fields of pyramids with no point. Unfortunately, the truncation makes the internal structure vulnerable to the elements, and some of these mighty works are literally rotting from the inside out. Hopefully, the legacy of greed from an earlier age can be overcome. Great Zimbabwe. The Great Zimbabwe ruins are the largest collection of ruins in Africa south of the Sahara. Located in the heart of southern Africa, between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, they are a testament to a culture of great wealth and great architectural skill. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, Great Zimbabwe was home to a cattle herding people who also became adept at metalworking. The ruins are the largest of their kind on the Zimbabwe plateau, but they're also by no means unique. Although smaller sites were ransacked by European treasure hunters in the 19th century, these smaller ruins are called Zimbabwe's and can be found as far as Mozambique. Out of all of these, the ruins of Great Zimbabwe are the largest. Great Zimbabwe ruins' granite walls, embellished with turrets and elegantly sculpted stairways, seem to have had no defensive function. But in the words of archaeologist Peter Garlake, they displayed an architecture that's unparalleled elsewhere in Africa or beyond. Although inexpertly restored in many places, the ruins at Great Zimbabwe are still by a good margin the most impressive ancient structures in sub-Saharan Africa. They're also the source of considerable pride for present-day Zimbabweans. After all, the huge chiseled walls of the great enclosure, with its soaring stone tower and complex chevron patterns, are a work of high engineering skill. Much about Great Zimbabwe is still a mystery, owing in large measure to plundering of the site around 1902. But it can be stated with certainty that the Queen of Sheba never drew breath here. Instead, at any given time during Great Zimbabwe's heyday, anywhere between 10,000 to 20,000 black Africans did. By the 13th century, they dwelt at the epicenter of an industrious southern African empire, with trading links stretching as far away as India, Persia, and China. Outside these splendid stone buildings, however, the mass of people lived in conditions resembling a modern slum. By the 16th century, when the Portuguese arrived in southern Africa, Great Zimbabwe had fallen into obscurity. No one's certain why. A stonework entirely without mortar gradually improves until the newest walls stand double the height and width of the old structures. A second wall, a meter inside the enclosure, forms a long, forbidden passage. At some points, the walls are 11 meters high and extend over 800 meters. 8 Benedau. When it comes to Casbahs, 8 Benedau is one of the most exotic and best preserved in the entire Atlas region. Although towered red Pise is a feature of much of the south of Morocco, 8 Benedau has a definite edge over the competition. It comes as no surprise that among all other crenulated offerings, 8 Benedau became the favorite filming location of many Hollywood directors. Lawrence of Arabia was filmed there, Orson Welles used it as location for Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Epic of Jesus in Nazareth. The whole lower part of the village had to be rebuilt. A good consequence of the film industry's fascination with 8 Benedau is that good restoration work has been undertaken. First, UNESCO placed it under auspices as a World Heritage Site, and then the Moroccan government itself jumped on the bandwagon in 1994 to rehabilitate the Casbah to preserve the cultural and natural heritage. The result of all this work is 8 Benedau back to its former glory, a magical and fascinating place worth exploring for hours or even a few days. It's impossible to determine exactly how old the Casbahs are, though the first buildings at 8 Benedau are believed to have been built since the 11th century. The area was a strategic position on the route from Marrakesh through Telluride to Ouarzazate and the south. Appearing from the barren desert landscape, the Casbahs were a major stop for camel caravans carrying salt through the Sahara and returning with gold, silver, and slaves. In its heyday, 8 Benedau was a busy, teeming bazaar with fortified towers and reinforced walls. Guards would watch at the top of the watchtowers, peering through small windows to keep an eye for invaders. Inside the Khazar, there was a central mosque surrounded by family homes, communal areas, and small palaces. In its earlier history, Ait Ben-Adau is believed to have housed thousands of people. At the fall of the 20th century, the French built a new road over the Tichka Pass, thus diminishing the importance of the Marrakesh-Ouarzazate caravan route. Therefore, the population at Ait Ben-Adau quickly dwindled, and today only half a dozen families live in the Kasbah. Ait Ben-Adau is a Khazar, a fortified city composed of 6 Kasbahs and nearly 50 houses. The structure is piled upon a low hillock above the shallow reed-strewn river Oued Aunia. The Kasbahs are towered and crenulated, and with high walls made with red, dark pisé and connected through an elaborate maze of narrow routes. Chella Rabat. Now lying in ruins, the settlement of Chella outside Rabat is a fascinating archaeological site, providing insight into the history of Morocco. Also known as Salah or Chella, the remains of this ancient settlement overlook the fertile river plain of the Oued Bou Regreg, about 2 kilometers from where the river enters the Atlantic Ocean on Morocco's coastline. Some scholars believe the site was originally a colony established by Phoenician and Carthaginian explorers going back to the 3rd century BC, which would make it one of the oldest human settlements in Morocco. There's evidence that Romans occupied the site as early as 40 CE, and renowned Greek-Roman astronomer, mathematician, and geographer of the 2nd century, Ptolemy, noted that Romans developed the site as a port and commercial hub, naming it Sala Colonia. The Romans lost the site to local Berber tribesmen around 250 AD, and in the 12th century the Almohad ruler Abdul Mumin built a huge fortress at the site as a base for attacks against Spain. The fortress walls surrounded the entire site, including the abandoned Roman ruins, which became a burial ground. With Fez rising to power in the 13th century, Chella was all but abandoned before being resettled by the Marinid dynasty between 1300 and 1600 AD. A mosque, zawiya, and other structures were later built at Chella by a sultan of the Marinid dynasty named Abu Lisan, many of which remains today. Visitors to the ruins of Chella will find unmistakable evidence of Roman occupation. These subterranean structures for water supply and waste removal revealed that the Romans were an advanced civilization at the time. Marble statues and columns are scattered throughout the Roman section of Chella, some of which are inscribed in Latin. Certainly a visit to Chella should be on the itinerary of visitors to Rabat who are interested in the ancient history of Morocco. Jamila. With Jamila, Algeria is a strong contender of having the greatest Roman ruins of North Africa. While the ruin area itself is not one of the largest, it's often well preserved, and the adjoining museum is virtually packed with excellent mosaics. Mosaics that so often else have been transported to national museums far away. Altogether, Jamila stands out as one of the best preserved Roman ruins of North Africa. Jamila is the modern name to ancient Quikul, a military garrison that was founded in the 1st century AD that should exploit and control the rich surrounding agricultural areas. The city has 2 forums and a theater, capacity of 3,000. That was put outside the city walls simply because the terrain where the city is located was so limited. A baptistry and a basilica was added to the Quikul in the 4th century. There can have been as many as 20,000 people living here at the most in the 3rd century. Quikul was abandoned in the 5th century. Excavations began in 1909. Entrance at the site passes the museum that simply is too small for all it contains. 3 rooms are loaded, mosaics as mentioned, as well as marble statues and things like oil lamps and items for cooking. Of the buildings around Jamila that needs an explanation, there is the Europe House, which has its name from a mosaic inside. It's made up of 18 rooms around a courtyard decorated by Ionic columns. The baptistry is still ornamented by the original mosaics, while the dome is restored. The Great Baths is in exceptionally good condition, and pipes and double panels where hot water circulated are visible many places. Behind the Great Baths, there is the great door that leads to what once was the Christian Quarter. Leptis Magna. Leptis Magna in modern-day Libya was a prominent city of the Roman Empire. The ruins of Leptis Magna are in Combs, Libya, 81 miles east of Tripoli, on the coast where the Wadi Lebda meets the sea. The site is one of the most spectacular and unspoiled Roman ruins in the Mediterranean. The city appears to have been founded by a group of local Berbers and Phoenicians sometime around 1000 BC. The town did not achieve prominence until Carthage became a major superpower in the Mediterranean Sea in the 4th century BC. At the end of the Punic War in 146 BC, Leptis Magna then became part of the Roman Republic. During the reign of Augustus, Leptis Magna was classified as a civitas libera et immunis, free community, over which the governor had an absolute minimum of control. Leptis Magna remained as such until the reign of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, when the city and the surrounding area were formally incorporated into the empire as part of the province of Africa. It soon became one of the leading cities of Roman Africa and a major trading post. Leptis achieved its greatest prominence beginning in 193 AD, when a Berber native son, Lucius Septimius Severus, became emperor. He favored his hometown above all other provincial sites, and the buildings and wealth he lavished on it made Leptis Magna the third most important city in Africa, rivaling Carthage and Alexandria. Leptis Magna Arena in the imperial era. Amphitheaters became an integral part of the Roman urban landscape. As cities vied with each other for preeminence in civic buildings, amphitheaters became even more monumental in scale and ornamentation. Imperial amphitheaters comfortably accommodated 40,000 to 60,000 spectators. They featured multi-storied arcaded facades and were elaborately decorated with marble and stucco cladding, statues and reliefs, or even partially made of marble. Spectacles involving animals, venationes, survived until the 6th century, but became costlier and rarer. Many amphitheaters fell into disrepair and were gradually dismantled for building material, raised to make way for newer buildings, or vandalized. Others were transformed into fortifications or fortified settlements, such as at Leptis Magna. The Roman amphitheater of Leptis Magna was capable of seating 16,000 spectators. Unlike most Roman amphitheaters, it's built below the ground. Volubilis. The archaeological site of Volubilis was recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site in Morocco in 1997. Even though this wonderful site has been looted for granite and marble to build structures in the nearby towns of Malay Idris and Meknes, the remaining structures and mosaics tell the tale of a city that once thrived. The ruins that have been spared are beautifully preserved relics of the Roman era, and it's for its historical value that the archaeological site of Volubilis was listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Morocco. It's believed that this spectacular city was constructed around 40 AD, and that it was built on an old settlement which dated back to the 3rd century. It became the administrative capital of the area and was known as Mauritania. The extremely fertile lands that surrounded the city produced olive oils and grains that were exported to Rome. Archaeobotanical projects at the site have proved that 2 types of wheat were produced here. It's also known that after the Romans withdrew from Morocco, which happened around the end of the 3rd century, the city was not left uninhabited. An earthquake in the 4th century is believed to have caused extensive damage to Volubilis, but documents have revealed the arrival of Idris I in the year 788. Idris founded the Idrisid dynasty, and on his death in 791, he was laid to rest in Moulay Idris. Another earthquake rocked the site in 1755, possibly causing its final abandonment. In the 18th century, builders started to loot the ruins for building materials. French archaeologists started excavating the site in 1915, and more than 2,000 excavations by numerous institutions have followed. Most of the structures are still in impressive condition, and the mosaics are as beautiful as the day they were created. This wonderfully preserved site should be visited by everyone who comes to Morocco, as it provides a rare glimpse into the past. Djenné. Replaced in the 12th century by the nearby city of Djenné, Djenné was a major trading center in the central Niger Valley from the 8th to the 11th century. The ancient city of Djenné was located about 220 miles or 354 kilometers south of Timbuktu before its decline after the 11th century. Djenné served as an important commercial center in the Niger River Valley. Its ruins are still accessible, and archaeological evidence shows that approximately 10,000 person lived in Djenne Djeno at its peak. The same evidence also suggests that residents of Djenne Djeno enjoyed a relatively egalitarian society, as the dominant elite present in most European cities in the same period was absent in this desert urban center. By the 14th century, residents deserted the city in favor of the more prosperous Djenne, only 2 miles (3 kilometers) distant, which became an important intellectual and commercial center for the region. Djenne remained an independent city outside the jurisdiction of the various empires rising and falling around it, and one seemingly without imperial aspirations, until Sunni Ali Ber conquered it in the 1490s. Djenne's location provided some security for traders, as it was surrounded by the 2 rivers for nearly half of each year. However, the protection of the rivers did not prevent more powerful invaders such as the Mali in the 14th century, the Mosi in the mid-15th century, and the Songhai under Sunni Ali Ber in 1491 from laying siege to the city, nor from Moroccan invaders in the 1500s. The Dogon are an ancient people of Mali in northwestern Africa. Presumed by anthropologists to be root African humans, they inhabit an almost inaccessible, inhospitable desert south of Timbuktu and south of the Niger River on the southern edge of the Sahara Desert. Because there are no paved roads, no electricity, no surface water, and little contact with the outside world, the Dogon territories in the Hambori Mountains have been called the end of the earth. Indeed, the word Timbuktu, in the 16th century a thriving metropolis of 1 million Muslims and now reduced to a crumbling village of only 10,000, is synonymous with barren desolation at the end of nowhere. Anthropological studies by the French in the 1930s, and more recently by British anthropologist Robert Temple, have revealed a stunningly complex and sophisticated Dogon society. But what's amazed and mystified researchers most is the fact that the Dogon have a quite unusual and extensive knowledge of the star system Sirius. For centuries, the Dogon have held as their most sacred religious tradition a body of knowledge of the star Sirius, which should be impossible for any primitive tribe to know. They consider, for example, that the most important star in the sky is Sirius B, a small star that orbits the brightest star, Sirius. But Sirius B is invisible to the unaided eye and was only photographed by a telescope for the first time in 1970. Their ancient drawings show the helical rising of Sirius with the Sun and Sirius joined together. They show the rings of Saturn and the 4 major moons of Jupiter, as well as the elliptical orbit of the invisible star Sirius B around Sirius, and relate that not only is it a dense and heavy star, which it is now known to be far more dense than Earth, but correctly note that the elliptical orbit is completed once every 50 years, an event they celebrate at exactly the proper moment, even if only once or twice in a person's entire lifetime. To add to the mystery are strange cliff dwellings that were carved into the Hamburi Mountains above the Dogon villages many centuries ago. But the rooms are far too small for normal-sized humans to live in. Dogon legend has it that these dwellings were inhabited by a long-vanished people they called the Little Blue Men. These beings are known as the Namo,